everyone. So we are going to be doing the Cassandra embellishment for the SS47, and this is a fun project, and it just really has worked out really nice. And so just thought we talk about it a little bit before we get started. So this is using the SS47, and we got a lot going on here, but it's not as it looks like it's a lot, but really it's all building on to stuff that we've already done before or something similar. Some things are a little different. So what we did with this particular embellishment, and we did it on the front and the back, and it just really adds a lot of dimension. And what we did is we created a little bit of it gives it kind of a boxy feel to it, very Art Deco. And these are really fun colors. I kid you not, I feel like they're gypsy colors using this. But it really, I'm making these for some really important people, and people that are pretty awesome. So I want to make sure I do everything correctly. Anyway, so this really turned out nice. So I think we're going to enjoy this. This will be something we'll be using the Cassandra project, but of course you can use it in a variety of other projects as well. So that's why I'm going to show you how to embellish this on its own. And let's have some fun. All right, so meet me back here and we'll go over some of the things we're going to be using. Alright, so again, this is going to be, we're going to be using the SS47 crystal, and this is a beautiful crystal. It's just a little smaller than your 12 millimeter, and we are going to be using 11 Delicas. What I did for these particular ones, I used a transparent rainbow dusty rose. Really lovely color, very fun to work with. And sometimes you use things instinctually, and then when you're done, you're just like, wow, I didn't expect it to look like that. It's that much more. And then we are going to be using 15 Delicas. This will add a little extra dimension and give us that little bit of extra room that we like. And then we're also going to be using 15 round seed beads to add this additional texture, okay? And then on the embellishment on the outside, we're using 2 millimeter fire polish. This is cranberry mirror that we're using. And then we are also going to be using a 2 millimeter denim mirror as well. And this, I couldn't be more pleased with how this turned out. It just so cool. It just, like I said, it reminds me of gypsies, the color. And then, so we're going to have a lot of fun working with this. It's just so many projects that you can use this with. I'm just that excited. All right, so gather your materials and let's get started. Okay, so as we get started, a couple of things to get started with is, now you don't have to do this, but I like to do this, and that is put clear fingernail polish on the back, especially if you have a foiled or some sort of protective backing on your Rivoli. That's when I do that. If you don't have any type of backing, then I would not do that. But if you have any type of backing, just to protect your piece, I like to put a light, just a light coating of clear fingernail polish. You don't have to do it, and this is a Swarovski, so Swarovski's has a really strong and nice backing, but just that little bit of extra can make a huge difference. And so I've already done that. I've let it dry, and now I'm ready to go. And so I threaded my needle, and what I did is I did 1 wingspans. Now this is more than plenty, but I like to have enough so that way I don't have to add onto it for my component of this particular bezel. Okay, and what you're going to do is put your stop bead halfway through. Okay, and I am using 4-pound. You can also use 6-pound Fireline. I would stick between either 4 or 6, and we're going to be reinforcing everything here, and that's the reason why. And I like reinforcement because it brings things in tighter when it needs to be without being too tight. It's a combination of having good tension to begin with where there's a little bit of room, and then just bringing things together when you reinforce. Alright, and then on my thread I have a total of 28 11/0 Delicas to go ahead and get started. And so that's what we're going to get started with. And then we're going to do, what we're going to first start off with is we're just going to create that circle. Okay, so just wrap the thread around your finger. Okay, let me get a little closer so you can see what I'm doing. Go through the very first 3 11/0 Delicas to create that circle. There we go, and gently you just bring it all together. Ta-da! And as we bead, we want to make sure things don't bunch up too much. So what I like to do as I'm beading, because you know when you do a little tug, it's going to create a little extra tension, is I'll just use my fingers to roll things to create a little bit more space. And if I start off with this down here, I then move my stop bead to give myself a little extra room and thread. Okay? Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and put on our second round for peyote stitch. Sorry. So for this particular stitch, I do like to do flat and then forming, and the reason why, it just doesn't fit as well as I needed to on my finger. Now for you it might be different, so if you are able to form it as you go, more power to you. For me, I just have chubby fingers, so this works best for me. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm just making sure I have some room. And then I'm just going to pick up a 11/0 Delica, so I'm coming out of here. I'm going to skip this one and set my 11/0 Delica that I just picked up and go through the very next Delica. There we go. Make sure things sit nicely. And then again, don't forget, I'm going to do some rolling of my beads up ahead so they don't get too tight as we go along. There we go. It's always harder to start off with. There we go. So let's go ahead and do the next one. So I'm coming out of here. I'm picking up a 11/0 Delica. I'm going to set it on the next one and go through the following Delica. So you're skipping every other bead, and as you skip it, you're going to set a bead on top of it. There we go. And sometimes they don't quite go into place, so go ahead and fix that. When you start off, as you get further on, it just naturally falls into place. So just like that. Alright, I'm going to roll some beads so I don't have it too tight. And if you need to, just slide your stop bead to create that little bit of extra room. And then you go all the way around. Alright, so make sure you go all the way around. And then once you're done, make sure you go through that very first 11/0 Delica that you added to complete the full circle. Okay, that just creates an extra strength and solidarity in the circle, and just gives it the extra support that it needs, so that it's a complete circle. Okay, so meet me back here after you've gone all the way around, And we'll get started with the next round, which would then be our 15-0 Delicas. Alright, so here I put on my last 11-0 Delica. Then I weaved my way all the way through here and went through my very first 11-0 Delica for the second round. So before we get started on putting on our 15-0s, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be shaping this, okay? And when I shape this, actually before we do that, let me just tell you what we're going to be doing with our 15-0 Delicas. So, because it's a little easier to see in this pattern. So what we're going to do is we're coming out of one 11-0 Delica. We're going to pick up a 15-0 Delica and then go through the next 11-0 Delica that is sticking out. And we're just going to go ahead and do that all the way around. Just and what that will do is that will create a smaller circumference because we're using 15-0s versus 11-0s. But before we get started with that, we're just going to go ahead and form this. So I got a pencil here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very gently, making sure I got all the beads going in the same direction, is just form it so that it's a ring instead of a flat disc. Alright, so we're turning this flat disc into a ring form and just going all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just getting it started in that direction, so it'll make it easier for it to form what we need it to form to put on our bezel, on our Rivoli. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get started. Alright, so I'm coming out of this 11-0 Delica. I'm picking up a 15-0 Delica, and I'm just going through the very next 11-0 Delica sticking out. Whoops. Don't want to catch my tail thread. There we go. And I just do a gentle tug. Alright. There we go. It doesn't fit perfectly on my finger, but we'll make it work. Alright, so let's go ahead and do the next one. So I'm coming out of here. Whoops, I'm coming out of here. I'm picking up a 15-0 Delica and going through the very next sticking out 11-0 Delica. So my 15-0 Delica will sit in that notch, and I just do a nice gentle tug. And if things aren't sitting correctly, just, you know, rearrange them and do that again. One thing you can do if it isn't, just, you know, take your needle and just gently tug that way, and then just retug. And just be gentle. You don't want things too tight, okay? Because you're going to tighten things up when you reinforce. Alright, so go ahead, go all the way around, alright? And when you're done, and you put on your last 15-0 Delica here, okay? Make sure you weave through this 11-0 and go and weave through that very first 15-0 Delica that you put on, okay? And once you've done that, meet me back here and we're going to get started on our 15-0 rounds, okay? Alright, so this was my last 15-0, whoops, this was my last 15-0 Delica. I weaved my way through here, then here, the very first 15-0 Delica that I put on. Now I'm ready to start my round 2 of my 15-0s, and this, I've switched to my 15-0 round. So I'm just going to be coming out of here, picked up a 15-0 round, and then set it on top of here in the little notch, and then go through my next 15-0 sticking out. So I'm just going to go like that, very gently, do a little tug to make sure things sit correctly. And then I just do that all the way around. So it's just like with our Delicas. The only differences is now we're doing rounds and we're going through the 15-0 Delica sticking out. So I'm coming out of here. I picked up a 15-0 round, which will sit right here. And I'm going to go through my very next 15-0 Delica sticking out. So go ahead. Whoops. That got a little tugged off of my finger. There we go. It's just void making a knot here. There. Straighten out the thread, make sure there's no kink, and then go all the way through. There we go. Alright, let me just redo that because I think I might have been out of camera frame. So let me redo that. I apologize. Alright, so I'm coming out of here. Whoops. I'm coming out of here. I'm going to pick up a 15-0, sit it on top of here, and go through my next 15-0 Delica. And I'm using 15-0 rounds for this pass. There we go. And I just do a gentle tug. And if things don't sit correctly, I just pull out just gently the bead and then do another tug. And you want to be very gentle when you do that. You don't want things overly tight as we put things on. So go ahead, do that all the way around. Alright, once you're done and you put on your last 15-0 round right here, make sure you go through this 15-0 Delica and this very first 15-0 round that you put on, okay? Remove your stop bead and then meet me back here and we'll get started on our back side. And the reason why, even though we're not done with the front, we want to go back and forth to make it even, okay? So, go ahead, finish up your 15-0 rounds for the first pass. Remove your stop bead, and we're going to go ahead and get started on our 15-0 Delicas. So go ahead and do that. Meet me back here, and we'll put on our 15-0 Delicas at the same time. Okay, so I've threaded my tail thread, and I've weaved my way so that way I'm at one of the 11-0 whoops, it might help if you can see what I'm doing here. I'm at one of the 11-0 Delicas, and I weaved it so that my thread is coming out of one of the 11-0 Delicas sticking out. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to add our 15-0 Delicas just like we did with the front. The only difference here is we're going to be popping in our stone about halfway through. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're just, for example, I'm coming out of here. I'm going to pick up a 15-0 Delica, sit it in the notch, and go through my next 11-0 Delica. And I'm going to do that halfway through, pop in my stone, and then go all the way around, making sure I weave through this 11-0 Delica again and that very first 15-0 Delica that I put on. And one way to do that, to get started, so you can see a little bit better, is I'm just going to be sitting it down this way. And the reason why is I want to be careful that I don't create this. I want to keep this as a cone shape, and I don't want to widen this over here. So I want to be careful when I'm putting it putting these 15-0s on. And usually, you know, depending on the size of your bezel, you can hold it. And if I were to try to hold it the other way, I run the risk of potentially stretching it out, and I don't want to do that. So I think for this video, I'm just going to go like this. All right. So I'm coming out of here. Whoops. I'm coming out of here. And I'm going to pick up a 15-0 Delica, which is going to sit right in this little dent, okay, this little notch. And then I'm going to go through the next 11-0 sticking out. So I'm just going to move my front thread out of the way. And I'm going to pick up a 15-0 Delica. All right. And I'm going to just go through that next sticking out 11-0 Delica. And I'm just going to do a gentle tug. And same thing. So sticking out, picking up a 15-0 so it sits, whoops, might help if I don't block it with my hand. We have the sticking out, picking up the 15-0, which will sit right on top of this little notch, and going through the next 11-0 Delica. So just like that. Just gently, and then just a gentle tug. Alright, and we're just going to go halfway around. Oops. And if things don't sit nicely, don't pull too much. Just do a gentle tug up and then just reset it. Okay? sometimes the bead gets caught or the thread gets caught on something, so just be gentle when you're doing this. That's the key thing. And the reason why you want to be careful is, whoops, I screwed up. So let me back out. There's two ways to back out. So I try to be very careful when I'm putting my thread through so that I don't weave through another thread or something. Sometimes it's impossible depending on how many passes you've gone through. But if I can back out that way, I can. Otherwise, I take my needle off my thread and I just gently lift up the thread that I just went through. And you want to be very careful with your thread because this is Fireline and it's bonded, so you don't want it to start fraying or coming unravel in the bond. If it does, that thread is already weakened and you don't want to use that for your project. So go ahead and end where you're at before, and if you were to use it, your project runs the risk of breaking. Okay. All right, so let's do a few more and then we'll pop in our stone. There we go. All right, I think I'm ready to pop in my stone, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Whoops. There we go. Let's maybe do a few more here before I do that. Whoops, my hand got caught on the thread. Do a couple more. Move the front thread out of the way so it doesn't get caught on anything. There we go. A little gentle tug. Now we'll go ahead and put in our Rivoli. There we go. You're going to want to hold it in place so that way it doesn't, I mean, right now it's still loose. So go ahead and just hold it in place. And as we put on our second round, or the 15-0 rounds, it should get to the point where it's tight enough that you don't have to hold it in place anymore. But until then, it might be a little loose, okay? So go ahead, go all the way around. We just got a few more, so let's go ahead and do that together. There we go. And so this is my last 15-0. Okay, I'm coming out of here. I'm going to go through here. And then I'm going to weave my way through this 15-0 that I first put on for this first round. So just like that. And if you can't, if it doesn't, feel free to do like not doing everything at once. Okay, now it's time to switch over to our 15-0 rounds. Alright, so just like we did with the front, we are just picking up, we're coming out of one 15-0 Delica. Whoops, might help if I don't have my hand right in front of the camera. We're coming out of one 15-0 Delica. We're picking up a 15-0 round, setting it on top of this little notch, and then going through the next 15-0 Delica. And we're just going to go all the way around. And once we're done, we're going to make sure we go through the very first 15-0 round that we came out of. So I'm just going to hold things in place here. There we go. And because things are still a little loose, and that's okay. So I'm just going to go like this. And if things don't sit nicely, just go ahead, lift up the bead, and then just do a little gentle tug and make sure it sits in the center, okay? And as we go around, things will slowly tighten up without being too tight. All right, so let's do a couple of more. And if for some reason your stone does pop out, just pop it right back in. There we go. And just do a gentle tug. And again, this is not quite sitting in the center, so I'm just going to lift up. And then I'm just going to hold it down, do a gentle tug, and there you go. So go all the way around. When you put on your last 15-0 round, go through this 15-0 Delica on this very first 15-0 round. Meet me back here and we'll get started on the additional embellishment of the back, okay? We're going to do the additional embellishment on the front, the back, and the front before we do our reinforcement, okay? Alright, so now we're going to do our additional embellishment on the inside of the peyote stitch. And what we're going to do is we are going to create this pattern. And that creates this little box-like feel to it, okay? So that's what we're going to do now. And we're going to do the back first, and then we're going to make sure the front corresponds with the back. So that way this peak matches the peak in the back, and this little mini peak matches the mini peak in the back, okay? So we want to be conscientious when we do the front, what we've done in the back, okay? But the back, we get to say, hey, we're getting started. So this was my last, right here was my last 15-0 round that I put on. So I weave through here this Delica and then through this 15-0 round. So which was my first one that I put on for this particular round, okay? And the great thing about this embellishment is we are actually going to be reinforcing the 15-0s as we do this, so that way when we're done with this embellishment, all we have to do is reinforce the center of the spine. Woohoo! All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a particular pattern, okay? So right now, I'm coming out of this 15-0, all right? I'm going to pick up one 15-0 and go through the next 15-0 like this. Get a little closer and let me, oops, I went a little too close. There we go. And then let's go ahead and go through our next 15-0 sticking out. All right. Then we're going to pick up another 15-0 and go through the next 15-0 sticking out. Now here's where we create our pattern, okay? We're going to skip and go through our 15-0 Delica. So we're not putting any beads on. Okay. Then we're going to go through our next 15-0 round. We're skipping on adding another bead, so we're not adding anything. And we're just going to go through our 15-0 Delica. There we go. Move thread out of the way. And then go through our 15-0 round. So just a quick look of what we've done so far. So for the third round, so let's consider this our third round, we put on a 15-0 here and a 15-0 here. We didn't put anything, whoops, let me do it this way. Actually, let me grab another needle here. Alright, so let's review what we've done. Okay. We put on a 15-0 here. So this is our third round. And part of the third round, we're going to skip and adding beads, and then add beads in some places but not every place. Okay, so it's basically what we have been doing. The only thing is we're going to skip a few spaces. Okay, so for the third round I added a bead here and here. So I'm adding, so the first two I add, then I skip two, and now I'm ready for the next set. So my thread is coming out of here. I'm going to add one 15-0 and then go through the next 15-0 like that. Now I just added one, but I'm going to go ahead and skip two spaces for the third round. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this 15-0. Let me move some of my thread out of the way. Go through the 15-0, following the 15-0 Delica, and then go through the next 15-0 Delica. And then going through the 15-0 round seed bead. Alright, so let's just review once again. So for the third round, I did two, I skipped two, I did one, and then I skipped two. Alright, so let's go ahead and do the next one. And this is corresponding to right across from where we did two. So we're going to go ahead and put on two. Make sure. There we go. So I'm coming out of one 15-0 round and going through the next 15-0 round, and I picked up one because here we're going to be putting on two. So that's the first one. Then I pick up another 15-0 round and go through the next 15-0 round. Okay. Then I'm going to skip two. Just like that. And so I'm just weaving my way through because I'm skipping two spaces for the third round. There we go. So I skipped two spaces, 1, 2. All right, corresponding to this side is where I added one. So we're going to go ahead and add one. And then we're going to skip two spaces. Whoops. Sorry about that. My thread got caught on something. There we go. I'm just going to move my thread out of the way. There we go. And this should bring us back to our third round. So I am going through that last space that we're skipping, and then I'm going through the 15-0s to that very first 15-0 that we added. So we should be at the place where so this will technically be our fourth round, and we're just going to add a bead over here and then a bead on the opposite side. Other than that, we're not adding any additional beads, okay? So we're just going to weave through everything and reinforce everything as we go along. So I'm coming out of here, and this is the fourth round, and we're just adding one bead. We're going to do something a little different. So I'm coming out of this 15-0. Whoops. Let me move the bead that I'm adding. So I'm coming out of this 15-0. I'm adding a bead, setting it on top of here. I'm going to go through the bead right below us and back up through the bead we just added, creating a little hug. And that will reinforce that little peak. There we go. Make sure things sit down correctly. So now I'm going to go through, because right now I'm coming out of here, the bead below the bead I just added. So I'm going to go back through the bead I added. I'm going to hold things in place. There we go. Then I'm going to go down the 2 beads, the 15-0 rounds, okay? And I'm just going to weave my way around this whole piece until I get to the opposite side, okay? So go ahead, and we're just going to weave all the way around, and we might as well go ahead and reinforce everything as we go. So I'm just weaving through. I'm not adding any beads. And I'm just doing a couple of beads at a time. You can do 1 bead at a time if you want. You know, you just want to be careful as you do this. Whoops. Hold on. I'm just going to pick my piece up for just a moment, just so I can get my front thread out of the way so I don't accidentally weave that in. So I'm just moving my piece back over here. And I'm coming out of here. There we go. I'm almost to the opposite side. All right, so now I'm at the opposite side. And as you can see, whoops, we have these 2 beads here that we added. Whoops, we have these 2 beads we added on our 3rd round. We're going to add our 4th round right in between the 2. Okay, so I'm just going to weave my way up. And I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to pick up my 15-0 and set it on top of right here. I'm going to go through this 15-0 right below the bead that I'm adding, this direction, and then back up, and then through the 15-0 that I just added, which will create a little hug. So just like that. Hold the bead in place. Then I'm going to go through the bead I just added. Hold the bead in place as I just do a gentle tug of the thread. And then I'm just going to go down these 2 beads here to reinforce. And then I'm just going to go across until I get to that very first peak again to make sure I've reinforced everything. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these 15-0s, and this way I know that I reinforced everything until I get to that very first section where I have 4 rows, where I have that top peak. So I'll go past the little small peak. We'll call it the small mountain. Whoops, might help if I stay in frame. So I'm just weaving. I'm not adding any more beads. And keep in mind, for the 4th row, we just added 2 beads, 1 on each side for the large mountain. There we go. So now I'm coming out of here, this 11-0 Delica. So I've already made 1 full turn. Okay, now go ahead, thread your front, and we'll create the embellishment for the front. Okay, and meet me back here. Alright, so now we're going to do the exact same thing we did on the back. We're going to do to the front. The only thing is that we need to be conscientious of making sure that it's mirrored. Okay, so to do that, we need to know where we're at. Now things might be slightly different for you than it is for me, so check and see where you're at. And in this particular case, I'm coming out of this 15-0 right here. Okay, and if I look across, I see that this is the 15-0 that I'm corresponding with. So I skip 2 spaces and then do the small mount, start with the small mountain. So just adding for the third round, 1 15-0. Okay, so do yourself a favor. If you want to follow along with me, have yourself coming out of a 15-0 going in this direction, so that way the first mountain you're going to be putting on is your small mountain, but you want to make sure you're at the very beginning of where you skip 2 spaces. Alright, so just like the front, I'm going to do the exact same thing, and I like to, as I'm doing this, I like to go back and verify that I'm still mirroring what I did in the back. Okay, alright, so I'm coming out of here, and based on what I looked at in the very back, I know I'm skipping 2 spaces, so I'm going to go ahead and go through that 15-0 Delica and that 15-0 round seed bead. So that's my first space that I'm skipping. And then I have 1 more space to skip. And so I tried to do both at once, but it just wasn't going to work, so I'm going to do 1 bead at a time. So I just went through the 15-0 Delica and then the 15-0 round. So that's 2 spaces that I skipped. And again, it doesn't hurt to double check. So the next space I have, I should be putting on 1. Yep. Whoops. So the next space that I have, I should be putting on 1, the small mountain. And sure enough, we are corresponding. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So for the third round, we have the first small mountain, so I'll be adding to that. So when we go back around, I won't be adding anything to that small mountain. Now I skip 2 spaces because I just completed the small mountain. And so I just went through the 15-0, whoops, the 15-0 Delica and the 15-0 round. So that's the first space. I do a gentle tug. Then I'm going to go through the Delica and the 15-0 for the second. Move my thread out of the way. And that will be my second skip. Then I'm just going to move my back thread out of the way. There we go. Now I should be starting my very first big mountain. And yes, everything corresponds. So we're good. So the next 2 spaces I will be putting on a bead. And this is for the third round. The fourth round we'll put on the very last bead. So we just put on 2. Alright, now we skip 2 spaces and we're going to make another small mountain. So I'm going through a 15-0 Delica and a 15-0 round for the first space that I skip. Then I go through another 15-0 Delica and 15-0 round for the second space that I skip. This should be opposite my other small mountain, which it is, and it should correspond to the very front. So when I look at this, I'm also looking over here. Yep, it corresponds. So we know we're good. So we're going to go ahead, add one bead for the third round. So this is the small mountain. We won't be adding anything after that. And we skip 2 spaces after that. So go ahead, do a little tug, make sure things lie correctly. And then we go ahead and skip 2 spaces. So I'm going through the 15-0 Delica and the 15-0 round. Just sliding things through, do a gentle tug. And then I go through the next 15-0 Delica and 15-0 round. This will be the second space that I skip. And this should be directly opposite of my large mountain that I'm building. Yes, it is. And it should also correspond with the back, the beginning of, yep, it does. So now I add 2 beads for the third round. And once I go around for the 4th time, I'll be adding that 1 single bead. But after this, adding these 2 beads, I'm going to go ahead and skip 2 spaces. Whoops, might help if I only go through 1 bead at a time. There we go. Now we go ahead and just weave our way around, which will help reinforce the beads we just added. And we're not going to be putting anything on until we get to the first large mountain. There we go. So we're just reinforcing here. Might make sure I stay in camera frame. Again, I'm not adding anything, I'm just weaving my way around. Alright, so now I'm at the first large mountain. And as you can see, on the 4th round, I'm just going to be adding this 11-0 on top of here. I'm going to go back through that, I'm sorry, not 11-0, but 15-0. I'm going to go back through that 15-0 right below it, and then back up to that bead I just added. And what that will do is that will create a little hug and reinforce the bead that we just added. So I'm going to add a bead, and as I'm adding that bead, I'm going to go through the 15-0 it's going to sit on top of, just like that. Let it sit, then go back through the bead we just added, hold things in place like that, and then go back down the mountain. And again, we're not going to add anything until we get to the second large mountain. So we're just going to be reinforcing everything here. So I'm just moving my thread out of the way, repositioning this so we can go around. So I'm not adding anything, I'm just weaving until I get to the second large mountain. And I'm just doing a couple of beads at a time. You can do 1 if you want. I wouldn't do more than just a couple. I just turn the stone around so it's easier to watch. Alright, we're coming up to the second mountain. So I will be adding a 15-0 right here. That will be the fourth round. It's going to sit on top of here. So as I add my bead, I'm going to go through the bead it's sitting on top of, and then back through the bead I just added. So let me just get myself there. Whoops. There we go. Alright, I'm picking up a 15-0. I'm going to go through the bead it's going to sit on top. Just like that. Make sure it's sitting correctly. Then I'm going to go through that 15-0 again and then down the mountain. And I'm going to weave my way. I'm not going to add any more beads to this. Oops, might help if I... There we go. I'm just going to weave my way down the mountain. And we're not adding any more beads. I'm just going to weave until I get to the small mountain. And then I know that I reinforced everything for the inner part of the peyote stitch. There we go. And I've gone up to the small mountain. So now it's time to reinforce. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch. Now I have plenty of thread on my front, but not a whole lot on my back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch my needle over to the back and reinforce my spine with the back thread, okay? So meet me back here in just a moment if you want to do the same. So I would just judge. So and you know, if you don't have enough thread to weave all the way around, make sure that you at least weave half with one thread and the other half with the other. I'm going to weave everything with my back thread and end that thread, and then use my front for the additional embellishment, but that's up to you. Alright, so meet me back here and we'll get started on reinforcing the spine. Alright, so what we're going to do with this spine here, and I'm just using the shorter thread, and I weaved, since we've already reinforced the front and the back, we just need to do the spine here. So I weaved myself to the point where I'm coming out of one of the 11-0 Delicas where they're side by side, where you have two of them side by side. So I'm coming out of this 11-0 Delica right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through, I'm going to go through this, the opposite 11-0 Delica from there. There we go. And back through that very 11-0 Delica that was initially coming out of. And what that does is that creates that little hug that we like. And that just tightens things up and keeps things very secure. Then we're just going to go through that 11-0 Delicas, which is by itself, and make our way up to the next pair of 11-0 Delicas. Alright? And we'll do the same thing. So I'm coming out of here, and I'm going through here on the opposite side, making sure nothing gets caught, and then going through that 11-0 Delica that I was coming out of initially. Alright, so let's do that one more time. We're just going to go through our central spine, the one by itself, make our way to the two 11-0 Delicas side by side, go through one, go through the opposite side, the opposite direction, and then back through the one we initially came out of to create a little hug. Alright, so go ahead and do that all the way around. And what I like to do is I like to use the other thread to gauge where I'm at so I know when I've completed all the way around. Once you're done with that, meet me back here. We're going to need our 11-0 Delicas that we use for our spine. And we're going to get started with our stitch in the ditch. And this is a little different than what we've done in the past, okay? Alright, so with my tail, I weaved all the way around in this particular case. So I'm not going to be using my tail any further. Now, I haven't ended it simply because I'm going to use it as a guide when I reinforce my stitch in the ditch, so I know where I began and ended. Just a quick refresher, just a reminder, when you end your thread, you shouldn't end your thread unless you weave in and out and that you've turned around a few times, several times, or when you've done like 3 or 4 half knots. That is when you want to, then it's okay for you to go ahead and end your thread. But I'm going to keep this thread on in this particular case, and it just depends on the circumstances. And I'm going to be using my front thread, which I've weaved now, so that I'm coming out of right here. Let me back up. There we go. As you can see, I'm coming out of the very center spine where there's 11 Delica all by itself, okay? So right up on each side of that 11 Delica is a 15 Delica, okay? So I'm coming out of this Delica, and we're going to do things a little different with this stitch in the ditch than we've done with projects in the past. And so what we're doing is I'm coming out of this 11 Delica in the very center. I'm picking up 11 Delica, and I am just going to go through the very next 11 Delica by itself. Okay, so kind of like a peyote stitch when it comes to this stitch in the ditch, okay? So it's just a variation of a stitch in the ditch than we've done in the past. It's just basically a peyote stitch in a way. There we go. We're just having our, there we go. So that's sitting right there. And let's do that again. So I'm coming out of the very center 11 Delica where there's only one, so that the ones we're skipping are the two sitting side by side, and we're just going to put a bead, 11 Delica, sitting in between these two 11 Delica side by side, and going through the next 11 Delica. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that all the way around. All right, and you want to just gently make sure things are sitting correctly, you know. And then once you've gone all the way around, go reinforce everything a second time. All right, let's do this one more time here. So let's see here. So I'm coming out of this 11 Delica sitting by itself. I got the two 11 Delicas side by side. I'm going to pick up 11 Delica so it sits on in between those two, and then go through the very center next 11 Delica. So I'm going to go ahead and add 11 Delica all the way around. Alright, so I'm going to add 11 Delica all the way around. Once I've done that, and this is why I'm keeping this thread on here, okay, so I know it's past this very second one, is I'm going to go ahead and reinforce each of those beads, okay, then meet me back here and we'll go ahead and do the next embellishment. And just a reminder, if you're going to be using two colors, alright, you want to make sure you have color A and color B. Otherwise, just do one color of your 2mm fire polish, alright? And meet me back here, and we'll get started on our pattern for the embellishment. Alright, so when we add our 2mm fire polish, we're going to have two colors for those of you who are going to do two colors. Otherwise, you could do one color. It will look fine. But in this particular pattern, I am using two colors. So for this particular one, I am going to use the cranberry mirror as color A. And then I'm going to use the denim blue as color B. And when you look at this, so color B is going to be in places where there's a space. So anywhere there's a space on your stitch over here is going to be color B. And then color A is going to correspond with the large mountain. So the large mountain will get 2 of color A. And then the small mountain is going to get 1. All right. So if we look at where I'm at, I got 2 spaces. So I'm going to pick up 2 of color B. So that will be the blue. And if you want to follow along, just make sure that you maneuver yourself to 2 spaces before a large mountain. Okay, so that's color B again, because it's in front of a space. All right, now I'm at the large mountain, so I'm going to be adding 2 of color A. So color A. And all I'm doing is I'm picking up a bead and then going through the stitch in the ditch. And I went ahead and ended my tail since I've interweaved and turned around several times already with the tail. With the front thread, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce this embellishment, and then I'm going to put 3 or 4 half knots, and it'll be okay for me to end it at that point. So again, I'm now at 2 spaces. So I'm coming out of here. I'm going to pick up a bead and go through the stitch in the ditch. Just like that. Another space, so color B again. Alright, now I'm at the little mountain, so that gets 1 of color A. And then I'm at 2 spaces, so 2 of the color B. So picking up 1, going through the stitch in the ditch, making sure my beads sit nicely. And then again, color B, going through the next stitch in the ditch. Alright, now I'm at the large mountain, so I'll get 2 color A's. So picking up my first fire polish color A 2mm, going through the next stitch in the ditch. Then I'm picking up a second one and going through the next stitch in the ditch. And then I'm at 2 spaces, so I get 2 colors B. So I'm picking up color B, going through the stitch in the ditch. There we go. Then picking up color B again, going through stitch in the ditch because I have a space there. And then I'm at the small mountain, and that gets color A, 1. And I just go around. There we go. So all you need to do now is go all the way around, okay? And reinforce. After you reinforce, then go ahead and do 3 to 4 half knots, and you've got your embellishment done. Woohoo! Nice job, everyone. I look forward to seeing photos. This is a great bezel Rivoli. It can be used in many different ways, and you can get a lot of variety out of this. So I look forward to seeing your guys' pictures and your inspirations. Also, I would like to hear from you as to how you got into beading in the first place, what you like about it. If you know how long you've been beading, what inspired you to get into beading. All right, take care, everyone. Stay healthy and stay safe.